Hello there, and a huge welcome to today's episode of Gina Gardiner and Friends. I am delighted to be joined by Robyn Harris. She is a transformational well-being alchemist. She works with people to help them listen to their bodies, and I know from personal experience that when you ignore your body, you're storing up all sorts of issues, and helping them recognize they're not broken. None of us are broken, but we can heal ourselves. And we're going to be talking about this theme of not being broken. How do we make the very best of our potential? Robyn, a huge welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Gina. I'm delighted to be here and very excited for this conversation.
Before we get started in the body of our conversation, I want to know more about you and your background and how you come to be a transformational well-being alchemist. You don't see those job descriptions, in Indeed very often, do you?
No, strangely.
So tell us about you.
I think quite probably a common theme with other people who work in the wellbeing sector is that we've been on our own journey. We've gone off to try and see if it's possible to heal from something. And in getting out the other side of that, we then want to share with people that we see around us. Certainly, I know I myself see people who are where I was. And where I was feeling very lonely, very miserable, not heard, not understood, hopeless. I'd been going to mainstream medicine and just not really getting anywhere. I was given medication, I was referred to counselling, and this is going back 20 odd years. What I received at that time was not giving me what I needed. So, for those who maybe are finding themselves in that space themselves, I wanted to be able to say it doesn't have to be that way. You have inside of you so much that you can draw on. You just have never learned how to go within, how to connect with that, how to use it, to draw it out and use it. And you may be wandering around thinking, it's me, I'm broken.
Mm.
Nobody can fix me. I'm a hopeless case. That's where I was. So having realized that's not true at all, it's not true for anybody. I want to share with people, you've got this. It's just about exploring, about discovering your own unique way of being. There's no one size fits all. And then exploring how to express that, how to live that path for yourself. So because it is unique, it's not like you can necessarily look at another person and say, that's what I need to do and just copy them. You might be able to pick up bits and pieces from a range of other people, and that's okay. So it's giving people permission and encouraging them to explore their own inner wisdom and to listen to their body.
You know, one of the things that strikes me, and the more I work with people, and I work with a lot of people and have done over the years, as I'm sure you have, how many people are reluctant to go inwards. They look for all of the external reasons why they're not happy, why they're not successful, why they're not how they feel they ought to be. Very good word, isn't it? Ought. Um, and I think that the challenge for all of us is to recognize that the answer for most things lies within rather than externally. But that's hard, and people are very reluctant so often. They don't take responsibility. And I talk a lot about radical responsibility. Why do you think people are so reluctant?
I talk about responsibility. I have a way sometimes of dividing up words. I did it quite a lot in my book, which my editor was then saying, you have to tell people what you're doing and why. So responsibility, knowing that, because when I was a kid, I was the firstborn and I felt huge responsibility. I felt everything was my fault. I felt I was the one to blame when things went wrong, and they always seemed to be going wrong. So it was always my fault. And I felt that sense of responsibility versus, no, I have the ability to choose my response. But in answer to your question, I think we've always been taught to look for answers. Our school system works that way. If you're at university, you're taught to go off and research in the library if you've got paper to write, or if you're in research work, obviously that's what you're doing. You're researching, you're looking outside. We've got this saying of the truth is out there. So, and we're encouraged to be very, very cerebral, to think things through. And I remember as a kid being told, you're just not thinking it through and you're not paying attention. So, paying attention being watching with your eyes, thinking it through, being logical. We're encouraged to be logical. Our school system is very much along those lines. Whereas going within means listening not just to your head brain, but recognizing we have a heart brain and a gut brain as well, and that our body is constantly sending us messages. And when I started on my journey, I discovered that the heart gives out more electromagnetic activity than the brain, which blew my mind, because you always see those animations of little sparks flying in the brain, and those are thought processes. So your heart's doing more of that than your head brain is, and more messages go from the gut to the brain, the head brain, than the other way around. So when they say trust your gut, they say that for a reason, because our gut is very, very wise and it is sending us messages. However, the inner wisdom of our body is that quiet, still voice within. And in our noisy, busy world, unless we make time to step back from all of those pings and notifications and busyness, we struggle to hear that inner guidance. And sometimes we think that our emotions are our guidance, but they're our reaction versus our response. And the response, I would sort of say, maybe is the reaction, the emotional, what comes up in the moment, along with that moment of pause, that moment of stillness, that moment of just checking in. What is aligned for me here? How can I take responsibility rather than just reacting and feeling responsible afterwards then?
There's a huge amount in what you've just said. They talk about the gut being the second brain, and giving ourselves the opportunity to engage with that physical feeling, that somatic feeling. What I think many people do is that they feel the butterflies, they feel that sense of unease, or they feel very full, or they feel very light or heavy, and they make meaning of it. And the story that they use, that the way in which the gut and the brain particularly interact, is they make that story. I'm frightened. I've got stage fright. I can't do this. It becomes a limiting thing. And yet, the difference between excitement, for example, and stage fright is the difference between a great performance and no performance.
And the difference between anxiety and excitement is breath.
Yeah. Yes.
So anxiety is excitement without the breath. If we breathe, then we can start to feel, I'm actually excited about this. It's not, I don't need to be fearful. And I think it is that story, but that story is often something that we have learnt from the outside stuff.
I'm gonna say it's not real, is it?
No.
Or
And
I say to clients very often, it's as real as Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, it's a fairy story that either you have learnt or that you have created.
we've been conditioned into, because it only takes a parent, a very natural response. If your child runs out into the middle of the road or they put their hand on something hot, you pull them back.
Mhm.
And then you probably, again, you scared the living daylights out of me. And that poor child just goes into freeze for a moment.
Yeah.
And a belief is created in that moment of, which might be, that's fearful. To step out is fearful. To try something new, to be curious is dangerous. It's something, and this builds up over time. One instant, and if the parent then says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was just really shocked and worried for you because I care for you and I love you," and they make that repair, that'll be fine. Because we all do this kind of thing. It's not that the parent is a bad parent. But if that child never learns, actually, it is safe for me to try out things that I feel they might be different from everybody in my family, but that's okay. And to trust that inner voice.
I think that we have, as you said very much earlier in this show, we live in a very noisy, busy world. And we've not only got the voices of our parents and schools, we've got the voices of people that we don't know other than through the media, social media, who are so-called experts, influencers, who seem to have created a role within our society where they are deemed to be incredibly important. And I think that our own inner voice gets so little airspace that we give it very little importance, very little credibility.
And if everybody is following the influencer and their likes are just rocketing, they're going viral, I've got my little voice. I'm just one. And
Mhm.
nobody has said, yeah, trust your gut. Listen to what your voice is telling you. And it knows what's best for you. It knows who you are as a unique, amazing individual. No, everybody's following. And when, you're going through your own growth and you're a teenager and whatever, you want to be part of the group. You want
Yeah.
to be in the gang. You don't want to stand out.
We're hot-wired, aren't we, to be part of a group. It's our
Ah,
caveman and woman instinct. It's about survival.
yes. So then we give all of that accreditation to those people, those influencers. They're called influencers for a reason. So everybody's following them. They must be right. Like you said, they are the expert. I'm only little me. How can I then see no little you actually knows what's right for you? The influencer is great and they're doing a great job at what they're supposed to do, but they're not you. Look outside and get ideas, get inspiration, absolutely. But the final decision, the responsibility is within.
It's such an interesting thing. My background, I was a head teacher or a principal, if you're listening out of the UK, for over 20 years, and a teacher for 10 years before that. And one of the things that struck me is that we often in schools give children who are very independent of thought a bad time. They don't conform. They're quirky. They don't quite fit in. And so society is giving such a strong message all the time, isn't it? If you want to get on in this life, be a good girl or boy, fit in, do what the crowd is doing, be a lemming. And I think that we follow blindly. I'll tell you a short story. My uncle, he was a Coldstream Guard, very impressive man, 6'8" in his stockinged feet. And he once, in the middle of London, he stood on the pavement and he decided to do an experiment. And he just pointed up to the air, going, "Oh, there's nothing there." And before he knew it, there were a huge number of people who are all going, "Oh, look at that, look at that." Emperor's New Clothes, there was nothing there. And yet we feel that need to come in to belong.
And
And
not to be seen, not to see it.
I mean, it's the Emperor's New Clothes, the children's story all over again, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
And I think if you add to that our natural inclination to compare, it's a dangerous way to be, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are places where it can be good to decide that one thing maybe is better for us, to discern that's better for us and to compare it in that way, or well, that person's different from me. As long as I follow it up with that's okay.
Yes.
They do their thing and they shine at their thing. I shine at mine. They
Yeah.
don't shine at mine and I don't shine at theirs. And that's absolutely fine. That we give equal value to the thing, whether it's their thing or my thing, so that I'm not any better than them and they're not any better than me.
I think that's very, very wise. We're going to go to a break in a moment. When we come back, I want to talk about emotions. And I think one of the challenges for many people is that they struggle to deal with their emotions in whatever way and then tend to bury them. Um, and I think people are losing out hugely because emotions can be really helpful so long as we don't use them or abuse them or bury them. So don't go away. We're going to be back in a moment. You aren't broken. You can fix yourself. Don't go away. There's so much more to hear. Welcome back. Robyn, talk to me about emotions and how you feel that these fit into this scenario.
For me, I've come to see emotions as information.
Mhm.
They are feelings that rise up in us, and they rise up for a reason. Something has caused that emotion to come up in me. And then it's for me about, ooh, that's an interesting emotion. That's an interesting feeling that I'm feeling. I wonder what it has to share with me. You were talking before the break about how we often push emotions down. I think some emotions we've labeled as negative, and the connotation is that they are bad, and that nice people don't feel those emotions and certainly don't express those emotions. So if I'm feeling anger is a common one, and if I'm feeling angry, and I believe that nice people don't feel angry, and certainly nice people don't express anger, I'm wrong. I'm bad. And if people find out that I'm angry, that'll be a horrendous thing because then they won't want to know me. They won't want to be my friend because I'm a bad person. And then we start to feel shame, being different from guilt. Guilt is when we feel bad about something we've done. Shame is when we feel bad about who we are.
Mm.
Brene Brown talks about this. So I start to feel bad about who I am because if I'm angry, I must be a bad person because nice people don't feel angry. So then I push my anger down. But anger, to me, I think of anger like a burglar alarm in your house. It flashes because somebody's trying to break in. Anger inside of us is that somebody's breaching my boundaries. My boundaries are feeling threatened or they've been broken. So the anger is there to let me know and to give me the energy to do something about it. And that is then where responsibility comes in, that we choose how we respond, and hopefully we choose to respond in ways that are in alignment with our inner wisdom, that they're not violent or that sort of thing. But we choose to respond in a way that we can be happy with and comfortable with, and we won't look back on and think, oh, I'm so ashamed of what I've just done, which is what can happen if we press it down because it's like a stress ball. It pops out in inappropriate ways at times that we're not expecting. So listening to that emotion really supports our well-being because we can express it in healthy ways. Also, if we try to push it down and suppress it, we can't pick and choose. If we push down anger, we are also pushing down the things that we might want to feel: joy, gratitude, love. We end up pushing it all down. And then our life is just grey and bland. And what's the point? We need colour. We need emotions. I remember years ago when I was starting out on my journey, I worked with somebody who was also a songwriter. And she had a song called You Can't Paint a Sunrise Without Using Orange and Red. Orange and red being the colours that are often used for anger. And this was a beautiful song. And unfortunately, I can't really remember. I mean, this is going back 20 odd years. But this beautiful song was saying about it was about somebody who suddenly saw the sunset and sunrise and realized it's beautiful. There's a lot of emotion in it, but it's beautiful. It's not the emotions that are bad. Emotions aren't right or wrong, good or bad. They just are. We just feel them, and we don't get to choose necessarily the emotions that we feel, but we do get to choose which ones we engage with and how we engage with them. And if we say something like, ooh, that's interesting, a part of me is feeling anger. It's only a part, it's not who I am, it's not my identity. And it's interesting, it's curious, it has something to share with me. Rather than, oh, I'm so bad, I'm such a bad person, I shouldn't feel angry. You said about ought earlier, there's also the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the have tos and the musts.
Yes.
I'm very fortunate. My mum said to me when I was still quite young, remove those from your vocabulary. They're not helpful.
No, they aren't, and yet so many people live their life in that way. I find it very interesting that when you're talking to people about emotions, that this view that we have good emotions, bad emotions, I think that they are offering us an opportunity to learn, to grow. But I also recognize that we can't have light without dark. We won't know what's good without having a recognition of what is less good or bad. And you talk about the responsibility. I love that because what we do with those emotions, how we interpret them, and then what we do with the information that it's giving us is important. There are times when it's absolutely right to be angry, when there is injustice, unfairness, cruelty. But what are we going to do with it? And I think for many people that translates into aggression, which in my view does nothing but add fire to the fire, rather than having that step back that we talked about earlier on in the show, to actually think, why am I angry about this? And what's the useful thing to do?
Yes.
What techniques, what strategies do you share with people who are perhaps feeling overwhelmed by feelings of frustration, anger, loss, hopelessness?
One of the very first things, and one of the things that I think turns reaction into responsibility, is just that moment of pause.
Mhm.
Giving ourselves the space, the time, the permission to stop. Just take a moment, take a breath. Because when we're in that fight flight response or the freeze response or any of those stress responses, we do just react because our executive functioning goes offline and we just do what we feel our fight or flight wants us to do. Because fight or flight is all about action. So we do that thing, and then quite often we look back and think, oh, now I have to go and repair the thing that I said, the thing that I did, because that came out of emotion. It wasn't me, it wasn't my true self. And I feel a bit bad that I reacted that way. So I encourage people just to take that moment. And it may take some time of, oops, I've done it again. Oops, there, I've done it again. But hopefully you catch that earlier and earlier and earlier to the point where you then catch it before I did it. I just feel that emotion starting to build in my body because I recognize the signs. And I say, right, I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breath. And in taking that breath, we support our system. We help it to get back to being more grounded, more centered. And then we have greater clarity of thought. And we're able to make a choice, a response able choice, rather than that like just flash reaction. So taking a pause, taking a breath, but I also use tools like emotional freedom technique, tapping,
Mhm.
which helps to bring down that emotion, take the heat out of that emotion so that, again, we get that greater sense of groundedness, clarity, centeredness, and we can make that response able choice. And it's techniques and tools like that that, and just helping people to see what's going on, why their body's doing what it's doing, and why we react, because we have gone into something like fight or flight. There are various different fight, flight, freeze, fix, fawn, fidget, whatever one we've gone into. And I love Brene Brown, who talks about we armor up, we puff up, or we withdraw. So helping people as well to know what is your default. We
Mhm.
all have a default, and I know that mine would tend to be to withdraw. And then if I feel further pressured, I'll puff up, back off, don't push me any further, I'm feeling threatened. And if they keep pushing, then I might go into armor up and start to take more forceful action because I feel like I'm cornered.
And well, if we're cornered, very much like cornered animals, people then become
Exactly.
aggressive. It's
We
interesting.
are just animals.
We are indeed some perhaps less evolved than others, I have to say, when you look around the world. But there we go. I was just going to say about for me, the continuum between my reaction is immediately to bite back, to fight, to I'm going to deal with this. Nobody's going to get one over on me. And the other end of the continuum, people who are so frightened of being confrontational that they fail to confront the issue and they don't see the differentiation between the two. And the problem with that approach is they store it up, and then suddenly they explode. And the person they explode at is not necessarily the person who's been the one that's caused the problem. It's just that they've simply had such a body of challenge that they can't control themselves anymore.
And we quite often do that to the people we love the most. They talk about we hurt the ones we love the most. And these sayings and cliches come for a reason. But the fact that we would often lash out, bite back, verbally, whatever, to the one that we love the most is because we trust them.
Yes. Well, we
And
know that
we
they're
don't,
not us, even if we are a pain in the neck and that we do something inappropriate.
but also they probably won't bite us back.
Yes.
Because that was me. And I was saying before about when we push down our anger, we push down all of our emotions. We also push down the energy of that anger, because I was saying anger has an energy in order to help us take action. But if we're pushing down that anger, we're pushing down the energy, we're also pushing down our immune system. So we can end up getting quite sick. And Bessel van der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, was talking all about them. Because if we're not biting back, and there are appropriate times and ways, because we are just animals, and we do need to bite back, maybe not physically taking a chunk out of somebody, but we need to, when it's appropriate in appropriate ways, be able to say, that's not acceptable. I
Definitely.
have my boundaries, and I am asking you to respect them. If you don't, I'm gone, because I don't accept this kind of behavior to me if you're threatening me and pushing my boundaries in inappropriate ways. That's allowable, that's acceptable. But some people do grow up thinking that they can't do that.
We've only got a couple of minutes before the next break. So I'm going to set this theme for when we come back, but then carry on the conversation for a couple of minutes. I think one of the big challenges that people have, particularly in the world of work and with families, is that sense that I don't have a choice. That's my boss, or that's my mum and dad being inappropriate in terms of crossing my boundaries and being challenging. And therefore, I don't feel that I can say to them, that's my boundary, please don't cross it, because I'll lose my job, or I've got a lifetime with my over challenging mother or mother-in-law. That, the in-laws are a great source of that. So I want to spend some time after the break on that, if I may. But I suppose this business of dis-ease, the fact that when we are not in alignment with ourselves, that we become physically affected, and you talked about the immune system. We may come back to it, but in the 2 or 3 minutes we've got before the break, talk to us in more detail as to, why is it that we have that response, or our bodies have that response, when we are not really taking notice of our emotional state.
We have an inner nature. I call it our true nature. And if we're not living in alignment with that, as A.H. Almaas says, we have pain, and it is our pain. My pain is never going to be your pain, and your pain is never going to be my pain or the next person's. It's my pain, and it comes from the part of me that loves me the most, because the only way it has to communicate with me is to poke and prod me and nudge me. And sometimes that hurts, particularly if I'm not listening, because then it'll dial up. But what it wants is for me to know myself for who I really am. So that pain, that nudge is, let's just realign here. Let's get things the way they're right for you, so that you are living in your true nature. You're fully stepping into embracing and loving who you are. Because then I won't need to poke and prod and nudge you anymore. Because we'll be together, we'll be working synchronously together. And we'll be shining, sharing the gifts that I believe each one of us has, which is why our inner nature wants us to be in alignment, because that's when the light comes on. All of the terminals in the electricity circuit, they're all connected and we light up.
So if somebody's listening to this and this is a new concept for them, how do they start to find that real self?
Yeah, I think in our society today that is challenging because, as we talked about earlier, we're not encouraged. We're pushed through a particular way in our educational system and in the ways that we grow up, because our families have learnt it from theirs, and it just comes passed down the line. So we're not encouraged to be ourselves. We're pushed through the sausage factory. We're encouraged to be lemmings, was the word you used. So I think it's that practice. It's giving yourself permission to be curious, to go within, to listen, just play with it. I love Abraham Hicks, who says, "We all take this all too seriously." Play, play and joy and fun are so much a part of this journey when we allow them to be. So just try, just give it a go. Listen to what your body is, just that little inner nudge and thinking, I want to do this today. Try it. If it works, well done. You've learned something. If it doesn't work, well done. You've learned something. Either way. And then the things that you discover are lighting you up and bringing you joy and making your heart sing, bring more of those into your life. And the more we bring those into our lives, the less room we have for all the other stuff. If we're not paying attention to that, it'll disappear anyway.
We all need to be more childlike and
Yes.
stop being so childish, I think. We're
Yes.
going to go for our next break. When we come back, I want to explore these really challenging relationships that so many people have in their lives when it's very difficult to be clear about your boundaries and to hold to them. Don't go away. Back in a minute. Welcome back. I'm reminded of the number of times I've had conversations when we're talking about being able to stand in your power, to do that in a work, and to be clear about your boundaries. And then somebody says, "Yeah, but what about my mother-in-law who doesn't know the meaning of the word boundaries? Or what about my mother or my father or my brother? What about my children who have no idea of boundaries? And at work, I can't go and tell my boss that." What's your advice?
I'm going to tell you a story. I had a boss. In fact, I had two bosses. I left one job to take on another job because we were moving from the east of the UK to back to Bristol, where I had trained. And so my first boss was a bit of a bully. Lo and behold, so was my next boss. So there was a bit of a pattern here. And the next boss was a very big reminder of what growing up with my dad was like. So I was just hunker down, don't make a scene, don't get in trouble, don't be seen.
Mhm.
And then fast forward a few years, and I did become quite ill because of that and a lot of other stuff that was going on. And I wasn't speaking out and I was pushing things down. And then there was a whole big thing about the funding for my post because it was funded by the Access to Work programme through Department of Work and Pensions and the government. And they initially had funded 3 years, I think, and then they couldn't agree between, it was the university and themselves, who was going to be responsible for paying my wage. And every month I was getting my P45 basically saying your employment comes to the end at the end of this month. And then they would do some sort of shenanigans and it would be agreed I would have extension for another month. End of the month starts to approach, I get my P45 again, and this was happening again and again and again. And nobody was sorting anything out. And the head of the department was also my line manager. And I was like, come on. I didn't say anything because he was the one that I was kind of like, couldn't speak up in front of. And so I was just in my head saying, can you just get this sorted? I feel like you're not speaking out strongly enough on my behalf. Just somebody make a decision. If it's that I'm redundant, that's okay, because then I will be able to start my next chapter and make arrangements. But I can't cope with this. It might be, it might not be, it might be, it might not be. And in the end, my husband just told me I'd had a sense of humour bypass. I wasn't the person that he'd fallen in love with. And that left me feeling like it was quite a slap in the face. And I decided, yeah, you know what, you're right. I'm going to leave. I'm going to hand in my notice, which I did. And then I was the only person doing my particular role in the department. So then there was nobody. And guess what? I went freelance and they had to book me on a freelance basis. But that then meant I wasn't a member of staff. That wasn't my line manager. I could speak as I chose to because I wasn't afraid he was going to sack me.
I
But
think
I was then able to go in and just in ways that felt appropriate for me, show, not necessarily go up to him and confront him, but show this is not appropriate behavior. These are my boundaries. And now that I'm working in a freelance capacity, it's my job, my business, and I'm going to lay down those boundaries and I'm going to stick to them.
I think that's a really powerful model. Um, and ultimately, when we're talking about the professional life, we always have the opportunity to move. What I find interesting is that you had two bosses that were bullies. And
Yes,
I've noticed with many clients that there is a pattern that they
yes.
find themselves with bullies, and then the next one and the next one. And I think one of the things is about us looking at the patterns and thinking, I'm the common denominator here. What am I doing in terms of the choices I'm making, the actions I'm taking or not, that make that difference? But also, if we're talking about your parent or your in-laws or your children, sacking them in the sense that I'm going to go and go freelance, that's not quite the option. And I just wonder what your advice is, because I suspect that the principles are the same, but how would you go about that?
What I learned from doing that was that when I stood up and laid out my boundaries very clearly and stuck to them, he respected me an awful lot more.
Mhm.
Because the way that we treat ourselves, and if I'm telling myself I shouldn't be angry, I'm a bad person if I'm angry, I'm not going to show my anger, I'm just going to hunker down, keep the peace, and go home at the end of the day and just crawl into a hole or scream or whatever to try and release that stress. But if we speak up, stand up and speak up in a way that's aligned for us, we feel better and the person learns that that's how we are. They might not be very happy about it because they've had things their way and they've got stuff out of us that they wouldn't have got if we'd maintained our boundaries, because people who don't maintain their boundaries tend to say yes a lot to the other people, which means saying no to themselves. But if we stand up and say, I'm going to say yes to myself and my needs and I'm going to honor those, that shows how we want to be treated. If you don't respect it, then I get to choose that actually I'm not going to stick for that. I might not speak to you, even if you are my mother in law, even if you are my mother. But hopefully that will also role model to them. You can stand up for your boundaries. We can have open, honest conversations. It might not be comfortable, particularly at the beginning, while we thrash things around who am I, where are my boundaries, and you yours, because that's two people having to negotiate each of their own stuff and the intersection between the two. But by and large, it comes out better for everybody because nobody's then taking advantage of anybody else and feeling resentful that you're being taken advantage of. And everybody knows where they stand. And Brene Brown, I think it is again, says vagueness is not being kind to anybody. So if we're pussyfooting around and being vague and saying yes and feeling no, that's not being kind to anybody. It's not being kind to us. It's not being kind to the other person.
I think that's so true. I want to just share two short examples with you, both around families. So I was working with a client. Her mum sounded really challenging, very demanding, and really very nasty, unkind. And my view is if people are being unkind, it's usually because they themselves are unhappy and don't have a great sense of worth. And my client was trying to work out how to manage this. And we talked about boundaries and the fact that there was a pattern, and there usually is a pattern of the way people behave, that she would go and visit her mum, and it was a significant journey. She didn't drive. And by the time she got there, she was already waiting for that comment that her mum would make about you took your time to get here and you haven't been enough. I think there was two things. One is about we anticipate, and in that anticipation, it often grows in its power. But also, I said to her, when your mum is being that unkind, you don't have to stay. And I'm not saying you arrive at your mother's and you immediately go away, but you say to mum, I'm really pleased to be here, but mum, actually, I want to spend some quality time with you. So I'm just going to go for a quick walk. And when we come back, let's have a nice conversation. I'll make a cup of tea. And if you do that, that when they are being nasty in a nice way, no flouncing, no banging the door, you withdraw and say, I'll come back when you're actually feeling, better. They will start to get the message. And it's rather like training a puppy that, they have to know the mess that they're creating and make that connection between their behavior and how you're behaving. You just swallow it, they never do. And then the other is, again, about the story that we take, and it was with a client and his mother-in-law. And he was very resentful of the fact that she spent a lot of time at their house. But then when we started to explore it, she did a lot of childcare. And when she came, she did the ironing. And I said to him, have you ever taken the time to actually speak to her, get to know her, and let her know that she's valued? And by changing the way in which we behave, we change the dynamics. You always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Yeah. And it is so often that story that we're telling ourselves. And every time we tell ourselves a story, I'm always encouraging people are you, do you know all the facts before you put that story on the situation? And we won't, because we don't know what another person is thinking or feeling. So if we're then just taking our story and putting it on that situation. Our story is something that has happened to us in the past that probably wasn't very nice, and we're projecting that onto the new situation. So we're perpetuating it. And if we don't have the full information, it's probably not 100% accurate. It may be 90%, it may be 10%, but we don't know. And every time we apply it, and it seems to fit because we're pattern making beings, we're programmed and hardwired for that. So if it seems to fit well enough, we get a little dopamine hit and we feel good, even though we might be feeling bad about it,
Mhm.
which is a bit of a weird one. But it does affirm something for us and it just entrenches that belief even deeper. Versus if we, like you said, got curious and got to know mother in law, maybe she's lonely.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Absolutely.
her husband had died and she isn't used to being alone, and so she's coming around to help, but also maybe the husband might be feeling like she's interfering a little bit and taking up their family time. But she just wants to make herself useful to look after the grandkids, to spend time with them. I'm recently become a grandmother. I know what that's like. Uh, and also helping out. So she thinks I'm not being a nuisance because I'm helping out.
I think with all of this is creating an opportunity. Curiosity is so powerful,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
When we stop making judgments and start getting curious, we open the door of
Yes.
possibilities, don't we?
We do. And we open the door for them to share how they're feeling. Because if we're just making assumptions, there's that thing of an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. To assume makes an ass out of you and me. And just open the conversation. So what is your perspective on this? Tell me a little bit. Not maybe not as directly as that, but tell me a little bit about why you like to come over here and spend time here. Just what's it like for you? What's your perspective on it?
Just taking an interest in people and trying to actually understand. And I think for me, one of the big things is that's to take it out of habitual patterns of thought where we don't use our conscious mind to actually taking the time, as you say, taking a step back and think, what's going on here? What's going on here is we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, before we go any further, I want you to let people know where they can find you. So don't go away. Be back in a minute. Welcome back. So, Robyn, if people wanted to know more about your work or where to find you, where would they go?
You can go to my website, which is w-i-l-d.uk. So my business is Wild Wellbeing, Wild being an acronym, hence the W-I-L-D. .uk, there's no co.uk or com or anything, it's just .uk. And I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So any of those platforms, and generally some combination of Wild Wellbeing will find me.
Brilliant. We've got some time left in the show, and I want to really give people an opportunity to understand how do you work with people? What's the format of how you work with people? Because it is important that we own ourselves, all of us. And I do believe that the answer to how we feel about ourselves, how we operate in the world, is down to us taking, as you say, responsibility. So, how and what different ways do you work with people? Who do you work with?
I tend to work with people who have a similar journey to what I went through. So often that's people with chronic health conditions or people who have symptoms that maybe the medical professionals can't explain or say you just have to learn how to manage those symptoms. You know, the kind of people who maybe go to the doctor, they've had all the tests and the doctor's saying, well, there's nothing showing up on the tests. Don't know what's going on, but there's nothing there. So I can't give you anything unless maybe you just have this pill or, you know, go and exercise, take a walk every day or whatever. But there is nothing specific that they can find. And you're left feeling like, are you saying it's all in my head? But I'm experiencing these symptoms because I look at what the body is doing and I help people to understand why. And in terms of that kind of responsibility and getting to know ourselves a bit better, I start off asking people to write their timeline. And I have a video on YouTube which explains more about that process. And the process isn't just for me. I do take that timeline and I use it for an analysis that I do, which helps me then to report back to the person on what I've found, why their body's doing what it's doing, what it's actually saying, and how we can use that to get back to well-being. But writing the timeline is also for the person themselves, because quite often we don't realize quite the number of things that we've been through. I had somebody who came to me and she, did I really go through all of this? Well, it's no wonder I've been experiencing XYZ then, because I've been through a catalogue of stuff. Yes, but we don't recognize it. We minimize things. We just, oh, yeah, I'm sure everybody goes through something, or person down the road is so much worse than me. We're not really acknowledging and honoring the challenges we have faced and the things that we've overcome. So writing it down helps us to see, I got through that. I got through that using my own gumption and my own resilience and my strength. Yes, you did. Celebrate that. And the various different things we've learned, the ways that we've grown, the things that we've learned how to do. And I was talking to somebody the other day who's struggling with learning some new skills around all of this stuff. And were you born able to walk? Were you born able to ride a bike or drive a car? No. Did you give up the first time you fell down? And I'm watching this with my granddaughter now who's standing, but she's not quite walking yet. And she just boom, lands on her behind and just gets back up again. No, oh, I've fallen again. No, that was something that happens. I get back up and I just do it all over again. Isn't that fun? And she sits and she giggles. But we don't look at it like that. You were saying being more childlike rather than childish. So we take time to learn these skills, and then we forget that it takes so much time and investment and repetition and really that commitment to doing it again and again. And I say sometimes to people that we think our problems are big and scary and painful. So we assume that the changing of those is going to be big and scary and painful. We got there little by little by little by little. And it took time for us to get to where we are now. It's just doing the same little by little by little by little to get us to where we want to be. And it's about breaking it down, keeping it fun, making it feel manageable and doable and fun, and then we will do it. If you set up a plan, so many New Year's resolutions, oh, I'm going to go to the gym every evening after work. You get to the end of the day and you're too tired. You don't want to be then going to the gym, and that's going to take time, and then you're not going to get home until X, and then you have to cook. Oh, I can't be bothered to cook. I'll get a burger on the way home. Why did I go to the gym? I've just eaten a burger. And so it goes on, and we give up. The number of gym memberships that are still being paid in March, and the last time we went was the middle of January. So it's writing the timeline, breaking things down. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What is your body telling you? How can we use that information to get you from where you are now to where you want to be in small, fun, simple, repeatable steps that you will gladly commit to, because you do them once or twice and you realize that was actually simple. It was fun. I didn't believe that something so small and so simple could have such an effect, but it does. Small, simple changes have massive effects. And it's not just, oh, well, if I do it, it's impacting that one thing. It's like a domino, it ripples out. And then everything starts to change. You start to feel better. It builds a momentum. You don't want to stop because you're having too much fun and your life feels so much better than it did before. And you start to see, I've learned this skill here, but I can apply it over here. And it has the same or maybe a better impact. And so it just kind of mushrooms from there. And it's just that process of walking with the person, helping them to see the things they can't see inside themselves yet, so that they start to see them and start to put them into practice the way that is aligned for them, that they've maybe never learned, maybe never been encouraged to do before. And I think was it Oprah Winfrey said that a mentor is just somebody who sees the hope inside of you so that you can then see it for yourself.
I think the best gift you can give anybody is having belief in them, even when they don't yet have belief in themselves. We're very good at the grand gesture, aren't we?
Oh,
The
yes.
next bright, shiny thing, but it's the
Yeah.
small things consistently done. And I'm reminded of a client I worked with, a young lad who had been in his bedroom for 5 years. He was 18, he'd not been in school, he'd had a tutor 2 or 3 times a week who'd come into his bedroom. He had an ensuite in his bedroom. His parents brought him his food. And I can remember that the first task that he was asked to do was to walk to the first lamppost in the street. And he came back and he said, but my legs ached and it was really difficult. And we talked about the fact that, well, you're 18 now, don't do something different. You're going to be there when you're 60. That young lad, within less than a year, was at university. And it just shows you that tiny little beginning, that little kernel is something that can grow. And we all are like an acorn. We have the oak tree within us, don't we?
We do.
Sadly, we're at the pretty well at the end of the show, but we are very proud to belong to an organisation called B1G1, Buy One, Give One, which has projects around the world. And every penny, every cent goes to those projects. They're well vetted, so you know that the money that you donate is really making a difference. It's all about giving people a hand up, not a hand out. And I invite all of my guests to choose one of 4 themes. I choose different projects each month, but the themes stay the same: clean water, education, health, and reforestation. And we'll donate on your behalf. Which of those would you like me to donate to?
The last one, please, because I love nature and I'm very passionate about how much it gives us for our well-being. And forests, trees, they're right up there.
Thank you very much. Remember, just by listening, you're making a difference because we donate meals to the hungry based on the number of listeners. And please spread the word because in doing that, you get the benefit of the show, but also so do other people. And ultimately, some people go to bed with a full tummy rather than an empty one. And if you're a business owner, do think about joining B1G1. I'd like to invite you to download for free my leadership blueprint. That's an opportunity to do an audit, really, of where you are with your beliefs, your relationship with yourself, your emotions, and so on. You can have a free copy. All you need to do is to email me at Gina Gardiner and Friends at gmail.com. That's Gina, Gina, the word and, sorry, Gina, Gina, Gardiner, the word and, the word friends at gmail.com. Put blueprint in the subject line and we'll send you a free PDF. I'd love to hear from you. Really enjoy hearing what you think about the show and if there are themes that you would like covered, and I'll do my best to do that. But I also want to speak about another show that I have, and that is Gina Gardiner Showcases Tomorrow's Talent, which is designed for musicians. Now, you've got to be good, but if you'd like 4 of your tracks played and an opportunity to have an interview, much more of an interview than a discussion that we've had this morning, that tracks your musical journey, then complete the form, Gina Gardiner, tomorrowstalent.com, and you too could be in front of millions of people listening to your music and also listening to your story. Robyn, it just remains for me to say a huge thank you for joining me today. It's so vital, I think, that people take up the opportunity to be the healer of themselves. Just remind people where they can find you again.
My website is Wild UK, so w-i-l-d.uk, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Bye bye now.